Somebody requested that I do another video about gender. I thought I had said everything that I had to say on that subject. And I guess it's more difficult to make a video about since some of that is personal stuff that I ain't gonna say to strangers on the internet. But I like thinking about it. You know, gender and sexuality used to be a really, really, like restricted or like taboo or like strictly controlled, just like really stressful topic that was just like full of threats in the olden days. And now it's like very positive for me. And it's like something that I can think about and play with and analyze without feeling like there's horrible evil, I mean, I guess there's people being really awful about it, but like it's just nice and fun and more casual. So we're usually like very into it. And our upbringing has made us very hyper aware, or maybe just a little bit of autism as well, and just like personality. We just tend to be really hyper aware of our conceptions of gender at all times, and like what vibes we're putting forth and what vibes we want to put forth in other people. And it's just like something we focus on a lot. And so I want to have fun with that instead of letting it make me miserable, or as I used to do, using that kind of attention and interest to try to just shoehorn myself into one expression of gender. I guess there's a couple thoughts that I've had recently. And so I guess that's like, there's people who will criticize queer people for having their gender or sexuality be like their entire personality. Your personality can be whatever you want it to be. I mean, if that's what you're interested in, then do it. Like, there's people who spend a long time doing makeup or fashion or any other aspect of their life. And if what you want to do is fine-tune your gender expression, do that. There's also the fact, of course, that if you're queer, especially if you're trans and you want to like transition, or you're in a bad environment, it just is a big part of your life because like you're kind of dealing with a lot, like you're having to deal with it all the time. So it's both of that. But I don't know. I have a lot of interests and gender is one of them. Just I'm always aware. So I'm gonna use that in some productive way. What else? I think basically Lily from her. Oh yeah, and I go between we and I because, as my other videos say, I'm a plural system. I have OSCD. I have other videos on that which may or may not explain things and may be super confusing, as some people say. But yeah, that's why the we and I. But basically, this is my gender. Not entirely, to be fair, especially given the system. There are some of us that are like a lot more like macho. But as far as how we outwardly present, they're just so pretty. So pretty. I cannot stop staring. We've been doing a lot of inner child healing, except for us that's a little more literal, but it's the same thing. Inner child healing for us, so we've just been getting ourselves, and I'm definitely only doing it for the littles in the system. Yeah, not for the adults at all. No, just for the kids. But we've been getting like a lot of toys and things that we've always wanted, and just trying to feel less restricted about that, or like feel like understand that it's something that can have genuine meaning. If you put attention and love into it, it doesn't have to just be shallow acquisition. I mean, or it can be if that's what you're into, but we're not. Or have a little bit too much obsession, I think, with everything having to be meaningful. There's a lot of attention to detail. The point is, it's been really fun, it's been really nice, really healing to be able to go to a toy store and have a little blind box. Because we're very nervous about blind boxes because you don't know what we're going to get. And I'm the kind of person who I really care. Like, it's a big deal. So we were truly blessed because we got fair right away. Hey, little baby. And I just have this so I can have them displayed beside me. They're supposed to be obviously more for display and collection, so we take satisfaction in having them just like a doll and like, you know, I wouldn't say playing with them because we haven't been able to imaginatively play even the littles in like forever, and that's kind of sad, but we just haven't unlocked that yet. I don't know. Does this have to do with gender? Arguably. I don't know. You could probably make everything have to do with it. Conservatives certainly can, but I'm sorry. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try, because there's a lot of negativity as well. As I say, it's a fun subject for me. The fun subject part for me is just like, wow, look at all these varieties of people and all the colors that represent them, because I love colors. And it's just nice. But the non-fun part is obviously the politics and people getting mad about it. And people being cruel about it. We also have her. I had to have a whole process with her. Her head was way squishy. Still is, but it's okay. Only a little bit. Yeah. It's better. Anyway. So, in conservatism, there is the idea that somebody's gender expression or identity or sexuality is like this big moral threat. And I guess that's where a lot of the cruelty and a lot of the fear and like uptightness comes from, is the idea that it can be a huge transgression, like moral threat and like danger. And I've had to work through that feeling, and I've got to the other side where I don't really see it as a danger anymore, just like variety. And it's much better. The world has not changed at all, but now I have peace. And I can view different people's attitudes with like calm, I guess, or interest, rather than this environment of like having to put a moral judgment on it and trying to put a moral judgment on it and trying to make sure everything fits in, because that's stressful. Given that, oh, I forgot what I was gonna say. Oh, that's probably package. I think it's my sunscreen. So like, there's a lot of variety, and my definition of like gender is, in Tokipona I would translate it as nasincielo, which means the way of the body. So to me, the way I look at it is like the way and the patterns by which a person exists in their body, and kind of the gestalts to which they conform and contribute to. And every time that you contribute to a gestalt, a larger pattern, like say transness, masculinity, femininity, non-binariness, whatever kind of patterns exist in the world, it's reciprocal reconstruction. It changes you or you conform to it, but you also change it. And by being in that space, you also change it. And that's something that if you come from a conservative mindset, it's very difficult to accept because it's very scary. I'm gonna get my sunscreen. I'm traumatized from living in New Orleans, and I think people are gonna steal it. Sunscreen acquired. So also another thing about the, you need to see them, malleability of I don't know, human things. In reality is you could always find exceptions to anything that anybody says. Like if someone is like, oh, this is harmless, then you could be like, but what about this one case scenario in which it would actually be harmful? Or what about this person or this person's experience in which it was harmful? So if you come at it from like a militant or like a morally judging perspective, there's just going to be constant fighting. But I don't come at it from that perspective. So I can have fun. But obviously, if you really do believe that people will like go to hell for being gay or something, you need to get over that before you can, or get through and process that before you can like look at things dispassionately or with interest or with openness, because otherwise you're gonna be scared all the time and like offended all the time and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's important. To me, okay, yeah, let me think here. To me, gender is, everybody says a social construct. It's a social construct. Which means like, how I would think of that is like a body in itself, in the sense of, I have a very idiosyncratic way of using the term body. I use it for basically any entity, spiritual or physical. But it's an angel, a pattern, a body, an entity that beings and that people participate in, and through participating in, it changes them, they change it. So it morphs and shifts over time and space. And that's okay. And the main thing is that we keep the spirit right and don't be cruel to each other and don't be abusive of each other. And any body and any pattern and any relation can be co-opted and can be used in a malicious way. That doesn't mean that the thing is inherently evil, or that the change, like anything can be manipulated. You can manipulate the structure of marriage to be abusive. You can manipulate the structure of an open polyamorous relationship to be abusive, and vice versa. And I talked about this somewhere else, where like conservatives will see the slippery slope between kind of very outward visual changes, or like they'll see the slippery slope. They'll put various kind of outliers in the same category when one of those outliers has a good spirit and is something that's to do with love, and the other outlier is just straight up abuse. And then they will put in a different category something that looks normal and is evil versus something that looks normal and is innocent. But I think that's often the same for like gender and for the ways that these categories will change over time. And like, it's okay, like everything's not going to fall apart. Humans, naturally, we desire order, we desire pattern and coherence. And there's that book that's titled Things Fall Apart, but things also come together. Something Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. That was like his whole thesis. I love him. I love him particularly because all the Catholics seem to unanimously hate him. But yeah, so people will think when something changes, whether that be a societal structure or like a societal thing, or like a more personal thing like family or like gender or sexuality, then it will be scary, and also people might see visibly, it might be more visible the ways in which those things are being used for evil, and people might use that as a thing to say the whole thing is evil. Like, for instance, well, because certain people have been pressured socially into transitioning and then have detransitioned and regretted it, that means that all of being trans is fake. Well, there have been a ton of people who have also been pressured for 1,000 bajillion years into their gender conformities and have suffered in all kinds of ways for that, but that doesn't get criticized just because like it's normal and we're used to it. So yeah, I see gender, sexuality, types of relationships romantic relationships, platonic relationships, queer platonic relationships, whatever, that kind of has to do with those two, as structures, as bodies and patterns that we participate in. We can use them for good or evil, with a good or evil spirit, and we change them and they change us. And everything shifts over time and space. Yeah. And so, let me see how to say this. I don't. Okay, well, there's time and there's space. I think the modern. Do I want to say that? No. The modern queer and queer accepting community does live in a different space, in a different world of categories of gender, sexuality, etc., than the conservative traditional space. It's a different framework of things. And if two people of these two sides with these two different presuppositions speak to each other, they will not necessarily understand each other or see things or define things the same way. For instance, the way that, or most maybe obviously, the way that they define marriage and the way that they define a man and a woman would be different. Although, it's not like the conservatives can really agree either. So, as I say, everything changes and it is variable. But they have different definitions. And, you can move in. You have to decide which space you want to live in and which definitions you want to participate in and give your body to be shaped by, and which is beneficial. I have found that moving from the conservative / traditional side to I'm going to call it conservative because tradition, I guess, has more because there have been queer and trans people forever and in different cultures, and that is also traditional. So I'm going to call it conservative. So from the conservative side to the queer and queer accepting side, I have found it very, very healing, very beneficial, and also just that it makes more sense. It never used to make sense to me before. I just had to take people's word for it, and I was always trying to figure it out. And it never made sense. My conscience didn't line up with what I was being told and trying to believe. There were all of these weird, confusing messages. There were things being touted as okay, normal, or good that I was like, no, that's horrible, etc. So I found only good in moving from one to the other. The only kind of detriment is that you do have to kind of let go of some of the physical and move up higher to like the spiritual, say, in order to see a trans woman as a woman or a trans man as a man, or to understand somebody using fair pronouns and be able to like kind of see that as legitimate, then you have to define gender differently. And in the physical realm more loosely, overall more spiritually, you have to move what you use to define it like higher up on the scale in order to see that. And it's a different way of seeing. I mean, there's a baseline of like going from being super afraid and thinking that people who are gay or trans will go to hell or are inherently harming themselves, and then you can't see any variation because you're scared and you think it's evil and it's against your conscience, to just like say not really being able to see it or get it, but like, okay, I have respect for people as people and they're going to do what they want to do and it doesn't have to affect me, so I'm going to say their pronouns, or I'm going to, be okay with them getting married or living however they want, to like being able to see it and not only, say that a trans woman is a woman or call her she because she wants to be called she and you respect her and you think it's none of your business how she lives her life, to looking at her and being and like seeing her within the category of woman that is in your own mind. And you know, the one you can do kind of instantly and the other takes time and it takes deeply rewriting and kind of pushing your ideas and like a creative process of coming into a new or transformed, updated, I don't know, definition and conception of these categories. And yeah, both is good, but I think it's good to be able to see, not only just to say, oh well, okay, you know, libertarian, do as you please, and I'll respect you, but to see more, see these people as they see themselves, or as how God sees them. Of course, I say these people, being queer myself, I'm speaking from the perspective of myself pre coming out, where I had no inkling that I was any kind of queer. And I think part of that is because I've always enjoyed, I'm gender fluid and bi, so like, you know, I still am attracted to men and I still am a woman, so that part of me was always like there, so I was just able to kind of live in there and not see that there was anything else. Anyway, I'm speaking from that perspective, and it has been like a process. So I guess, and it's been for me, because all that I can do, I can't convince anybody of anything. All that I can do is say I've been through such and such a process, and invite people into the same way of or a similar way of seeing as I have, if they like it. I judge things based on the fruit that it bears, whether I bear the fruit of the Spirit in Christian terms, whether I'm my best or highest self in secular terms, I guess. I judge it based on that, based on the way that I feel and the way that my life flourishes or doesn't. To me, that's trustworthy. And yeah. So it has borne really good fruit for me, both in my relations with others and obviously in my relation within myself. Excuse me, to come from the conservative definitions of gender into the queer and queer accepting ones. But that doesn't mean that I've fully given up my own perspective and my own will, because again, it's reciprocal reconstruction. I still bring a lot of the, and now I'm going to say traditional, I still bring a lot of traditional conceptions and ideas and patterns about gender into the more accepting and more varied space that I'm in now, because that's part of who I am and what I've learned and how my tastes like have been formed. And some of that just means kind of bringing old traumas, and some of it means the way that I think about my gender could be in like symbolic Christian terms. Except I wouldn't exclude trans and queer people from them, kind of a thing. But I still might use symbols and use images that, and define them in certain ways that, like, someone not raised in Christianity wouldn't. And so I haven't just completely become a sheep and given up, my mind to this establishment and gone from one to the other. I'm, actively, there's give and take. And for instance, well, this isn't maybe the best place to bring this up. We're not going to bring that up now. But it's all a mixture. you're gonna have the old and the new mixed together, and also the new really is the old because everything, goes round. And you're gonna have everything mixed together. And as long as people respect each other and try to love each other, then it's okay. But you have trans people that might find a lot of joy from taking on the traditional and conservative signifiers of their gender. And then you might have those that are like, no, I don't want to do that. And then you might have, like, it's different. It's variety. The main thing is just to be able to be open and not to be afraid that you're going to lose all structure, because you don't. You just get more intricacy. You get more intricacy. But humans love order and patterns and will always do so. Yeah. So I'm considering talking, and maybe I'll even do that in a separate video because this one's kind of long. But I'm considering talking about my own gender fluidity and some things that I enjoy about that, and some ways that it's freed me up, and also some ways that it's healed me from certain, or helped me to more efficiently heal from certain wounds inflicted by a more controlling view of gender. But I am scared to, because I feel like a certain type of person would take it the wrong way and like try to pathologize it and try to use whatever I would say to pathologize it. And like, if for instance I would say, if I would say, when I have a more masculine presentation, if I'm wearing more neutral or masculine clothes and I have a more neutral or masculine haircut and maybe I aren't wearing makeup, I feel safer expressing my femininity in my gestures and voice and like facial expressions and just the way that I present myself. And that's a benefit that I find to being gender fluid, especially coming from an environment in which I'm used to my femininity needing protection. Like, that's just kind of, and I wouldn't say this is necessarily a good thing or an inherent thing to femininity, but how we work is generally, it requires more protection for us to feel safe being feminine than to feel safe being masculine. Anyway, if I said that, which is just a legitimate fact of my experience and a benefit and a healing aspect of my being gender fluid, then, and also kind of a little interesting complication of it, because I think a lot of people will say this, like, oh man, I wish I looked more. Now, no, they don't mean quite the same thing, but in a similar vein, a lot of people will be like, well, I wish I looked more masked so that I could be more feminine, or vice versa, which I find funny. But anyway, if I were to say something like that, I think a certain kind of person that dwells within my brain, because I know this perspective in and out, so a certain type of person would look at that and say, okay, so what you are and what you're saying and what you are, and this proves that you are a girl who's had poisonous ideas of femininity pushed into you, and therefore, or maybe you don't have enough like protection in your personal life and enough reliance on other people, and therefore you feel that it's necessary to look more masculine in order to be able to present your true self, which is femininity. And I'm self-conscious enough to not to think about how it's going to be received and think about that kind of thing, and for that to like turn me off really talking about it without this kind of side discussion, because I feel like I put my heart out there and I put my perspective out there, and then it just gets picked up and turned and like fed into the machinery of somebody's dogma, and that's not what I'm saying. and is not true, or that is not the best way to understand it. That narrative and that explanation may explain some parts of my experience and the experience that I'm describing. For instance, that I was raised with really bad ideas of femininity, that femininity is a true aspect of myself, and that my masculinity helps me express that. But it only describes part of it. It's twisting other aspects of it, like with bias, because what it's trying to do is not take the most honest view of my opinion, but rather that perspective is something that has already a fixed end in mind, which is to prove and demonstrate how I am a girl and how my gender queerness could be explained, pathologized, or is merely a reaction to a wound and not really who I am, or could better be addressed in other ways, such as by simply gaining more confidence as a woman. Something like that. And this is endemic, this kind of attitude is endemic to conservative circles and conservative frames of mind, because in that mindset, and I don't say it in a mean way because I lived in this mindset for 20 years, so like I know. In that mindset, it's all based on fear, and you come at things from a moral perspective first, rather than from a descriptive perspective of just curiosity and like, let me see what's going on here. Okay, I don't like that, I like this, I can understand that, I can understand this, but okay, I'm willing to change. Like that, you can't do that. If you do it, you have to do it in a fake way, because like the top priority is for these ideas that to you are absolute truths, for them to be upheld. And whatever you look at with the goal of feeding it into that moral system of meaning, because we all do feed things into our own systems of meaning, and that can even be helpful, because like I say, reciprocal reconstruction, there's a give and take. We interpret things in our own way. But when your own way of interpreting things is highly like moral and about putting things in like boxes of good or bad, that's when instead of creatively interpreting and receiving something, you're more like twisting it. That's when it gets into that territory. And it reminds me of, and then there's this idea of pathologizing anything that's different instead of being able to accept it. You can't, because like it's bad and it doesn't fit. You have to change very, very deeply in order to be able to come at something with a different attitude. But that's why I find it tiring to be in conservative circles a lot, because there will be this very deeply habituated, I mean, I'm still trying to work it out of myself, I swear, but deeply habituated desire to put a framework on whatever I'm trying to present and make sure that no, like it fits in here, and like reinterpret it, and it's weird. And well, it's not weird from their perspective, but it's weird being on the receiving end of that. And it reminds me of this. So I was listening to the podcast Dear Lana, and it was talking about gay conversion therapy. And what they will do is, again, they're not taking the person's experience and receiving it in a way of reciprocal reconstruction and acceptance. They're receiving it in a, okay, we have this preconceived end goal and framework. Let us see how we can take your experience, cut the parts of it that aren't relevant, and fit it into this mold. And so what they do is like pathologize it. Like they'll say, okay, and I don't know if I've got the details quite right, but their idea was, and possibly still is, which is just like, wow. But if you are lesbian, you didn't have a nurturing mother figure in your life, you just had a lot of toughness, and so now you're an incomplete wounded person, and instead of seeking for another a man, you seek for another, like a mother, and like a gentle nurturing. And so you're not able to seek a mature partner, you're still an immature person looking for what you never got as a child and trying to fulfill that in your romantic relationships. And that pathologizes the experience of being a lesbian and being attracted to women. And it has enough truth in it, or enough just statistical truth in it, that people believe this and they go through these programs. Because, yeah, a lot of people do not have enough nurturing in their life. And a lot of people do seek for romantic relationships that help them to heal the wounds of their childhood. And that can end up bad or it can end up good, you know. But what I'm thinking is, like, the only reason that they're coming up with that explanation is because they've set out assuming that being lesbian is a sickness and that they need to find a way to explain it as a psychological sickness. Because let's say that being asexual was the norm and we reproduced some other way, and that some humans experienced sexual attraction and the asexual people were in the majority, and then there were these people like getting attracted to each other and getting into relationships. You could pathologize that so easily. Do you know how much toxicity goes on in even in straight cis relationships? Do you know how much people are looking for bad things in a romantic partner? They're looking for somebody who reminds them of a past abuser because that's all they know in love. They're looking for someone to just take care of them. Like, an asexual majority could so easily say sexual attraction, if it wasn't necessary. Let's say that humans were, a little bit of a different species and that it was something of pure preference. They could say being asexual is normal. Sexual attraction, or even like if we figured out a way to reproduce and then the population, like, I don't know why we would become ace, I don't think we would, but let's say we figured out how to do it like test tube wise and then slowly that just fell out of fashion to be in romantic or sexual relationships with others. I don't know, you get the picture. But they could so easily say, oh, you experience attraction, you want a romantic and sexual partner because you didn't have enough nurturing relationships in your childhood, and you don't have enough self-love, so you're looking for another person to fulfill that. You don't need that. You could do it so easily. So it really is in your preconceived notions, and when you can change your preconceived notions from one of fear and moral categorization into one of acceptance, interest, curiosity, and creative reciprocal reconstruction, then you can have a more free and fulfilling life. And you might be more influenced to come out of the conservative world of patterns of sex, sexuality, gender, and gender expression into the more queer and queer accepting world.